Hi, fourth graders. Today we're going to talk about the wild horses of Assateague Island. Our I can statement today, I can refer to details and examples in a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. Since we've been working with the runner strategy, we included that in this PowerPoint. Now remember, you've got RUNNERS going down the left side of your page, and each one of those letters stands for a step you're going to take in the strategy. So the first R, read the title and ask yourself, is this fiction or nonfiction? The U is really important. You're going to underline words in the questions, and we do that first to give us an idea of what we're going to be looking for as we read. The first N says now, go back to the passage and notice any numbered paragraphs and label text features, things of that nature. The second N is now read the passage closely and carefully, and while you're doing that, you're also going to do the E. Enclose the clues and key details in the passage that show us the evidence. Lastly, the R and the S. You're going to reread the questions and all answer choices, and S, select the best answer from the choices that are given. So this strategy really helps us interact with the text and understand what we're reading. So we're going to model the runner strategy as we're working with this text, but things are going to be slightly out of order because of going back and forth between the screens. So we'll start here with underlining or highlighting important words in the questions. Let's start with the first one. The question is, the author describes the wild horses as. Well, here we're going to focus on describing the wild horses. And underlining, you can underline, I'm highlighting here actually. The second question, how does the author suspect the horses got to the island? Suspect is an interesting word because it kind of says to me that we don't know for sure, but we're suspecting or guessing how it happened. So I'm going to highlight that. And we want to know how they got to the island. Well, I certainly would like to know that as well. And the next question, why are the horses small and bloated? Well, that's a good question. So we want to know why they're small and bloated. So I will highlight that on question 3. Let's look at 4 and 5 as well. So throughout the changing seasons, the horses blank, and we're going to find that answer. So I want to focus here on changing seasons. I guess they're talking about, winter, spring, summer, fall kind of thing. And the next question, the wild horses of Assateague Island. Well, that doesn't tell me a whole lot in that question in the question beginning, but I'm just going to highlight the wild horses. That's our focus for today. These are our heavier text-dependent questions. So let's look at number 1, part A. What does the word adapted mean as it is used in paragraph 7? Well, I want to focus, of course, on this word, adapted. That's what we're going to determine the meaning of, and we definitely need to know where to find that and look for this answer, so that'll be paragraph 7. Part B, of course, goes along with number 1. Which statement from the wild horses of Assateague Island best supports the answer to part A? All right, well, I'm looking for a statement, one of the ones below, so I'll have to choose them, and choose which one best supports number 1. So for number 3, part A, which statement provides the best explanation of why the Assateague horses have survived on the barrier island for so long? So again, I'm looking for one of the statements below. I'm going to highlight that. Best explanation provides the best explanation. All right, I'm going to highlight that for why they have survived on the barrier island for so long. So why have they made it there? What makes them so tough is what I'm starting to wonder. Can't wait to read about them. And number 4, which sentence from the Wild Horses of Assateague Island best supports the answer to part A? So this one's a lot like number 2 on the last page. I'm looking for the sentence that best supports number 3. And number 5, part A, which statement about how the horses came to live on Assateague Island has the most support in the wild horses of Assateague Island? All right, well, again, I'm looking for the right statement below. And they want to know how the horses came to live there. So how the horses came to live. And we want to find the statement with the most support, so the strongest one. Part B, which phrase from the Wild Horses of Assateague Island best supports the answer to part A? So again, this is like number 2 and number 4. I'm looking now for a phrase, though, that best supports question 5. All right, so let's get started with the article. This is from the Wild Horses of Assateague Island because it's an excerpt. It's just a portion of the actual article. This is provided to us by the National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior. So as I'm thinking about the runner strategy, the first R says that you're going to read the title, which we've done, and we're going to think about, is this fiction or nonfiction? Well, I know that this is nonfiction because I know it's about horses, real horses on a real island. And fiction is pretend stories. That's the fake stories. We're looking at nonfiction. It also says here in the fact box that on Assateague Island, wild horses continue to live freely. In this informational text, so that's a clue there that it's a nonfiction sort of text. The author discusses how the horses likely came to the island and what their life is like on the island. So as you read, take notes on the wild horses' contact with humans on the island. So I'm just going to kind of note here that it's nonfiction with an N and an F. Now, we've done the U, underline important words in the question. So let's go to the first N. And that's just when we want to notice, do we have numbered paragraphs? Do we have text features? I do see that the paragraphs are numbered. I do see that we have some text features going on. We have a photograph. We have which is actually adorable. We have a heading here called a national treasure. And a national treasure makes me wonder if they're saying that the horses are a national treasure for us. That's kind of neat. And then down here, I also see some vocabulary items noted. And I guess we'll get into that in a moment when we start reading. So as we're reading and we're enclosing keywords and circles, one of the things I want to focus on is things that I can use to prove my answers, that I can use as evidence to answer my questions. So I'm kind of going to gear my circles that way. All right, let's start with a national treasure. The wild horses of Assateague Island are descendants of domesticated animals. So descendants means, if I go down here, a person or animal related to a group from the past. Okay, well, that's a great vocabulary word, so I'm definitely going to circle descendants. Now, what does domesticated mean? There's a 2. Let's go down. Animals that are made less wild to be pets or farm animals. Huh. I wonder if that means that my dogs are domesticated animals because, you know, they're like live with us and there are pets and stuff. So that's a neat vocabulary word as well. So they're descendants of domesticated animals brought to the island over 300 years ago. Wow, that's a long time ago. Horses tough enough to survive the scorching heat. Oh, okay. Abundant insects, that does not sound fun to me right now at all. Stormy weather, so I'm thinking storms, and poor quality food found on this wind-swept barrier island have formed a unique wild horse society. Interesting. It says enjoy their beauty. So the author here is saying that they're just beautiful, and I can see in that photograph they are. Enjoy their beauty from a distance, and you can help make sure these extraordinary wild horses will continue to thrive on Assateague Island. All right, so before we get any further into the article, let's find out, where is Assateague Island anyway? Let's check out this map. We see Maryland, the state of Maryland. I also see the state of Virginia, so I'm going to highlight those two. These are on the mainland. And then Assateague Island National Seashore is a barrier island that goes along the mainland. So it's this entire section here. Now, 2/3 of this seashore is owned by Maryland and is actually in Maryland, and that is called the Assateague herd of horses. And then 1/3 of it is in Virginia and owned by Virginia, and that's the Chincoteague herd of horses. Of course, we're by the Atlantic Ocean, just like North Carolina is here. Maryland and Virginia are as well. So one thing I like about this map also is it offers us the Park Service address and the telephone number in case you might need that. We do have a compass rose showing intermediate and cardinal, of course, directions. And then over to the left, we have fact box. Now the fact box says that Assateague Island is a barrier island and it stretches 37 miles long. A barrier island is defined here as a long, narrow island lying parallel and close to the mainland. So there's your math word right there, parallel. It's protecting the mainland from erosion and storms. So if this barrier island is protecting the mainland from a lot of erosion and storms, then that tells me the barrier island is getting hit by erosion and storms quite a bit. And in fact, barrier islands are always changing. They're in a constant state of flux or change. They're affected by the wind, they're affected by the waves. And so that sand is constantly shifting here and there. So here it says that it stretches 37 miles long. That actually changes a little bit here and there with the shifting of the sand. All right, so let's get back into our reading. Want to think about text features first, and I see a heading here, where did they come from, which I definitely want to know. I also see a couple of subheadings. Now the subheadings are also in bold, but they're in addition in italic print, so they're italicized. That means they're kind of written on the slant or off to the side a bit. And this first one says, were the horses shipwreck survivors or settlers' horses? Well, that'll be interesting to learn. So here we have a 5. That tells me that that's paragraph 5. And if I just count up, I know this is 4. And I know this one here is paragraph 3. So even though they don't number every paragraph, you can certainly figure that out. We do have some vocabulary information. We've got a 4 and a 5 here that'll tell the definition for abundance, abundance and also corral. So we'll check those out in just a moment. All right, let me shift to my pen. And as we're reading, we'll just circle things that we find are important that may help us use, we can use as evidence later. Local folklore. All right, wait a minute. Folklore is like folk tales, stories passed down through the generations by word of mouth, so people are just telling stories. Local folklore describes the Assateague horses as survivors of a shipwreck, wow, off of the Virginia coast. So this is the Virginia section and not the Maryland section. While this dramatic tale of struggle and survival is popular, there are no records yet that confirm it. All right, so no records, which goes along with the fact that it's actually folklore too. Well, that's an interesting way to think about it, that they're shipwreck survivors, but let's read this next section. During the 17th century, free roaming horses, cows, sheep, and pigs caused expensive crop damage, oh wow, to local farms. Farmers were required to pay taxes, oh gosh, that probably got expensive, on all mainland livestock and fence them in. Okay, so they had to pay for each livestock animal and they had to keep them inside of fences. Paragraph 5. Like people in the 21st century, these resourceful coastal residents looked for ways to avoid paying this tax. All right, so they didn't want to pay that tax money. They turned to nearby Assateague Island with its abundance of food, shelter, and a natural corral. Wait a minute. All right, abundance of food. Abundance, number 4, means a large amount of something. Okay, that makes sense. Shelter for the animals, and natural corral. It's a corral. Number 5, a pen for farm animals. Okay, a corral pen would be fenced in, but this is a natural corral made of water. Oh, because it's an island. Okay, that makes sense. So in other words, instead of having a fence up, you've got that water all around the island, so it kind of keeps the horses, so to speak, fenced in. All right, that makes sense. So if we continue our topic from the last page, it says it is likely that modern Assateague horses are descendants of those hardy animals that turned loose on the island to graze tax-free. So they're believing that that is the most likely way the animals got to the island as opposed to the shipwreck folklore. All right, so let's look with a highlighter. Just look at our text features here. We have Living the Wildlife in Maryland, that heading with bold print. And then we have 2 subheadings. What do they eat? I would like to know that for sure. And where do they live throughout the year? Now, both of those subheadings are italicized, so they're in that kind of slanted print. We have a 10 indicating paragraph number 10. Now that tells me, of course, that this is 9 and this is 8, and we could keep going. And we have 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we're going to encounter those numbers as we read, and we'll talk about the meaning of those vocabulary words as we go. All right, let's shift over back to the pen. Living the Wildlife in Maryland. It says Assateague's horses are uniquely adapted to survive on a barrier island. How do they do it? So they're adapted to survive on a barrier island. So we already read that barrier islands get a lot of storms. They take quite a beating. So if you're going to live on that barrier island, you have to be hardy animals, as it says here, hardy animals, and you have to be tough. So let's find out how they survive. By the way, the word adapted, you've seen that before, of course, in ELA and science. They kind of change their ways to survive. All right, topic, what do they eat? Well, it says the horses spend most of their time grazing on abundant but nutrient poor. Oh, nutrient poor, not a lot of nutrients. Salt marsh cordgrass, salt meadow hay, and beach grass. The horse's short stature, 6, I need to check that out. Short stature is a result of hundreds of years of adaptation to this low quality diet. Okay, so the low quality diet, that means their diet's not very good. Huh. Low quality diet caused a short stature. So stature down here, number 6. It says, using context clues, please determine the meaning of stature. Oh, okay, short stature. Wonder if that means that they're just not very tall. They're short stature. Let's look. Is a result of hundreds of years of adaptation to this low quality diet. Genetically, they are considered horses even though they are now pony size. Okay, so pony size would be smaller, shorter. They're short stature. So that just means they're not very tall. Next paragraph says the Assateague horses drink over twice the amount of water. That's a lot of water. That domesticated horses will, due to their salty food supply. Oh, interesting. All that drinking combined with a high salt diet contributes to their bloated appearance. So bloated basically means that you look like you well, kind of like you're puffed up, kind of like a balloon. If you stick a pin in a balloon, it will pop. And when your face gets bloated, you feel like your cheeks look a little larger. Like if you stick a pin in them, they'll pop. And that happens a lot of times if a person ingests or eats too much salty food. So these animals experience that as well because of the fact that they have a salty diet and because they drink twice the amount of water here. Interesting. So where do they live throughout the year? Well, paragraph 10 says that spring let's talk about, I think one of the questions had to do with seasons. So spring brings cool, rainy weather and fresh plant growth to the island. Many of the horses live in the marshes close to their best food sources. All right, so they live in the spring near the marshes. Foals are usually born in late spring. All right, foals, number 7. That was a terrible circle. But number 7 says, using context clues, please determine the meaning of foals. Okay. Foals are usually born in late spring. Okay, so those are the babies because it says, and they live with their mothers in a family group called a band. A band, okay. So foals are the babies. Each band is usually made up of 2 to 8 mares. Mares, number 8, down here says a female horse. All right, so 2 to 8 mares or girls. Their offspring are the babies or the foals. And a stallion, number 9, stallion means an adult male horse. And so that is what makes up a band at Assateague Island. All right, so on that last slide, a band is made up of 2 to 10 mares. I kept saying 8 because the number 8 was there for the vocabulary word. All right, so let's continue on with our pen. It says, hot, humid, and full of insects, summer brings a new set of challenges. All right, so now we're talking about the season of summer. The horses escape the mosquitoes and flies of the marsh by spending more time on the beach and in the surf. So we, during the summer, go to the beach and the surf, letting the refreshing ocean breezes carry away airborne pests. Oh, so the breezes kind of blow away anything like mosquitoes and flies and things of that nature, airborne pests. I guess that would happen if the breeze is heavy and, on the beach, you tend to have a pretty good breeze. Cooler fall weather, okay, there's another season, and fewer insects allow the bands to move from the beaches back to the marshes and their abundant grasses. Okay, so it seems to me like they kind of shift around depending on the season and the weather. The horses prefer to browse in shrub thickets during the damp, chilly winter season. All right, so in the winter, they go to the shrub thickets. Wonder why. Their thick, furry coats will protect them from ferocious winter winds and the occasional snowstorm. I guess the shrub thickets, that would be like really thick shrubs. That could protect them from some of the chilly winds too. So ferocious, number 10, we have ferocious winters here, extreme and unpleasant. Oh, that sounds rough. But it is a barrier island, and so we know there are going to be some rough conditions there. All right, so as we move to the next section, let's notice that we do have a heading here. Do they receive veterinary care? And a moment ago, we looked at the vocabulary word ferocious. So let's shift back to the pen. Do they receive veterinary care? While action may be taken to end the suffering of a gravely ill, seriously injured, or dying horse, no measures are taken to prolong the lives of Maryland's wild horses. Okay. As with the other species of Assateague wildlife, horses that are sick or weak do not survive. This helps maintain a hardy, healthy population of wild horses. All right, so they don't kind of step in Maryland to help the horses in those situations. They kind of let nature take its course. Now, it does here talk about Virginia, though. Virginia's horses are privately owned by the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Department, and they receive some veterinary care. So it doesn't say what kind, but it just says some veterinary care. So apparently they step in a little bit to offer that care. All right, on this page, let's go ahead and start with our highlighter. The heading here says, where can you see the wild horses? And we have subheadings. In Maryland, we have the Assateague herd, and in Virginia, the Chincoteague herd. We do have numbered paragraphs. Of course, there's 15. That tells me this is 16 and 17 and 18. And I don't see any vocabulary noted at the bottom of the page. So I'm going to shift back over to my pen. And in Maryland, it says Maryland's horses are owned and managed by the National Park Service. Okay. Maryland, the National Park Service. It says they are free-roaming wildlife. Oh, okay. And they could be seen anywhere in the park. During the summer months, many bands can be found on the beach. Well, that makes sense because we talked a little bit ago about how you have strong summer breezes that kind of keep those insects away. You can often see the horses and other wildlife by driving slowly along park roads. Protect island habitat by parking only in designated parking spots. Okay, parking only in designated parking spots. That makes sense. That's a good rule to follow. Designated, I lost my mouse for a minute, sorry, or my pen. The life of the forest and life of the marsh trails are good places to look, especially during the spring, fall, and winter seasons. So these trails are a good place to check out if you want to see the horses. It says, do not feed or pet the horses. Oh, I noticed this is entirely italicized here. Entirely. It says horses that learn to come up to the road are hit and killed by cars. My gosh. So do not feed them, do not pet them. That allows them to, I guess, get used to people and they can get hit and killed by cars. That's not good. So in Virginia, shifting gears, the Chincoteague herd, it says Virginia's horses are privately owned by the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Department. All right, I'm going to circle that, and that's in Virginia. And they're fenced in large enclosures. Interesting. Look for the horses in the marshes along the beach road and from the observation platform in the woodland trails. So observation platform. There we go. Now on this page we have a great text feature. It's a neat graphic that just talks about National Seashore Safety, and it explains that sometimes the best relationship is a long distance relationship, and it's just encouraging people, I think, here to keep their distance from the horses and not get too close. So we have a human being here with apparently with some binoculars, and then it's of course our horses here, and it's saying to stay about 40 feet away from the wild horses. We do want to give them space. They are wild horses. They're not domesticated. And 40 feet, it tells us here, is about 1 bus length. Now, if we're talking about wild seals, we want to stay about 150 feet away from them. And that would be close to 4 buses long, because 4 buses long would be about 160 feet. And that's 160 feet is about 10 feet different from the 150-foot mark. So keeping your distance from these animals and allowing them to be wild animals is very important. And just as a review, let's look at the runner strategy again. We've done the R, U, N, and the E. So now we're just going to focus on the last R and E. We're going to reread the questions and all the answer choices and select the best answer from the answer choices that are given. All right, let's look at question number 1. The author describes the wild horses as A, strong and beautiful. All right, I do remember them saying that the animals were strong because they're hardy animals that can live on the barrier island. And I also remember them talking about the beauty of the animals. So that's definitely a possibility. B, struggling to survive. Well, I don't know. It said that they had adapted to the environment and had been there for like 300 years. So I'm going to get rid of B. C, slowly dying off. That's not true because they are surviving on the barrier island. Protected from humans. They're actually not protected from humans totally. We are allowed to go and see them and get, somewhat close, within 40 feet of them. So they're not protected from humans completely. So the answer is definitely A, strong and beautiful. And of course, if you need to go back into the section and see it in the text for yourself, please do that. Question 2, how does the author suspect or think the horses got to the island? A, they swam to escape predators. Well, that didn't mention anything about swimming to escape predators. B, they were brought there by farmers. Now that was possible because remember the farmers did not want to pay the taxes for them and did not want to keep them fenced in all the time. C, they've always been on the island. Well, no, it said for 300 years, so that's not always. And D, there used to be land that connected to the island. No, it's talked about it being a barrier island for, it didn't really mention when it hadn't been. So it's definitely B, they were brought there by the farmers. Remember, they did not want to pay those taxes. Question 3, why are the horses small and bloated? A, because they don't get much exercise. Well, the text did not say anything about a lack of exercise, so I'm going to get rid of A. Because farmers are breeding horses smaller. Now that means that the horses would be bred smaller on purpose, and it did not say anything about that happening. C, because they don't get enough water. Well, actually, I remember the article saying they drink twice as much as domesticated horses, so it can't be C. D, because of what they eat and drink. Well, I remember it said that they eat salty kinds of food and they drink twice as much as domesticated horses. So the answer here is going to be D. Throughout the changing seasons, the horses A always remain in the same location. Well, I know that's not true because it did talk about how they moved to different areas. B changed bands several times. Well, the bands are like the family groups that they live in, and it doesn't say that they change bands at all. So I'm going to get rid of B. C, spend most of their time alone and hidden. Well, they're definitely not alone because they live in their bands with their families. So I'm going to get rid of C actually as well. D, move around according to where they can find food. So they do move around to different areas depending upon the season. So I'm going to definitely circle D. And the wild horses of Assateague Island A are owned but remain wild. Okay, they are owned by different states and they are allowed to be wild horses. That's very possible. B, tend to be healthier and happier. Well, I'm not sure that they're healthier. It doesn't really say that. And who would know if they're happier? I can't really ask them. So I'm going to get rid of B, I believe. And C, have more contact with humans. Well, they definitely do not have more contact with humans than domesticated horses. So I'm going to get rid of C as well. D, are available for the public to ride and feed. No, you have to stay 40 feet away from them at least. So it can't be D. So the answer is A, they're owned by people in the different states, Maryland and Virginia, but they are allowed to remain wild. All right, number 1, part A. What does the word adapted mean as it is used in paragraph 7? And paragraph 7 is actually in the box above the question. Assateague's horses are uniquely adapted to survive on a barrier island. How do they do it? So adapted means kind of changed to fit the environment. So let's find out. A, chosen because of a gentle manner. That's not adapted. B, changed in order to fit certain conditions. That could definitely be it because they're changing and the conditions on a barrier island are pretty tough. C, cared for because of harsh living conditions. No, adapted does not mean cared for. C, colored in order to match the surroundings. That sounds like camouflage kinda, and that is not adaptation. So the answer is B, changed in order to fit certain conditions. Now for part B, we have to choose the statement that best supports the answer to part A. So genetically, we're thinking about adaptation, guys. Genetically, they are considered horses even though they are now pony size. So their size has genetically changed. Whoops, genetically changed. I'll have to consider A for sure. B, many of the horses live in the marshes close to their best food sources. All right, well, that's smart. They're going to their food source, but that doesn't mean adaptation. C, foals are usually born in late spring. All right, well, that's pretty typical, so that's not adaptation. And D, this helps maintain a hardy, healthy population of wild horses. Well, that's good, kind of survival of the fittest, but that does not mean that we've got adaptation happening. Adaptation would mean body changes, so genetic changes, and we have a horse-sized animals becoming pony-sized animals. So the answer for number 2 is definitely A. All right, number 3, part A. Which statement provides the best explanation of why the Assateague horses have survived on the barrier island for so long? So why have they survived? A, the townspeople have kept the horses as pets. No, that is definitely not true. B, the horses are protected when visitors drive cautiously. Well, the visitors do drive cautiously, or they're supposed to. But does that mean they have survived that long for 300 years because of visitors driving cautiously? Probably not. I'm going to sit on that a minute. C, the horses adjusted to the island. Adjusted meaning adapted. That could definitely be it. And D, the fire department provides the horses with some veterinary care. I don't think that's the reason they've survived for 300 years. I think the answer here is definitely C. They've adjusted and adapted to the islands. And even though obviously it helps when people drive cautiously, I don't think that's why they've made it so long. All right, part B, which sentence from this article best supports the answer to A? So we're thinking about how the horses adjusted to the island. A, the wild horses of Assateague Island are descendants of domesticated animals brought to the island over 300 years ago. All right, well, that's true, but that doesn't tell me how they've adjusted or adapted to the environment. B, the Assateague horses drink over twice the amount of water that domesticated horses will due to their salty food supply. Oh, all right, they have adjusted to the island by drinking twice as much water because of the salty food. I think the answer is going to be B. C, Virginia's horses are privately owned by the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Department and receive some veterinary care. Well, that's true, but I don't think that tells how they've adjusted. The horses have adjusted. D, you can often see the horses and other wildlife by driving slowly along park roads. Yes, that's true. But that does not mean that's how they've adjusted to their environment. They've adjusted to the island by drinking more because of the salty food. And number 5, part A, which statement about how the horses came to live on Assateague Island has the most support in the wild horses of Assateague Island? A, the horses were placed on the island by the government. It definitely did not say anything about the government putting them there, so I'm going to get rid of A. B, the horses swam to the island after a shipwreck. Now, it did talk about a possible shipwreck scenario, but that was folklore. But I'm going to sit on B for a minute. C, the horses were put on the island by farmers. Yes, remember they didn't want to pay that tax money and keep them fenced in. And D, the horses were native to the island. No, they were not originally there. So the answer here is C, they were put there by the farmers. Number 6, which phrase from this article best supports the answer to part A? A, dramatic tale of struggle and survival. That doesn't say anything about being put there by the farmers. B, descendants of those hardy animals turned loose. Oh, it could mean turned loose by the farmers, so I'm going to sit on B. C, owned and managed by the National Park Service. No, that doesn't talk about the farmers. And D, free roaming wildlife and could be anywhere. No, that doesn't talk about the farmers putting them on the island. It's definitely B, descendants of those hardy animals turned loose, as in turned loose by the farmers. All right, so we've done a lot of work with the wild horses of Assateague Island. You've done a lot of inferencing, looked for a lot of text evidence. What are your next steps? Well, I want you to complete your exit ticket. Make sure you're reading U.S. States books on ARC Bookshelf to support our ARC unit. Make sure you're reading at least 30 minutes each day or night. And make sure also that you complete your reading log. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day.